Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a video that is going to review Michelin's Vancouver restaurants. In Vancouver, we just had the announcements for 2025 for our Michelin restaurants. We have now in total 76 restaurants that are recommended by Michelin. And I'm gonna go take a step backwards a little bit just to explain the Michelin system. I have done a video on this in the past, which I'll put at the end of this video. But you have to realize that Michelin is not a consumer awards or regular tasting. So the Michelin guide is really a certain standard and they prefer certain things. They actually say it mostly has to do with food, but it actually has to do with a lot of ambiance. And you can equate it to, in the wine world, wines that are really scored high and wines that consumers like. So it kind of draws people to the market, but I wouldn't say it's a consumer's choice award. And it has to be taken with a grain of salt. In general, the judges that are for Michelin are part of the industry. And so they are looking for technicalities. They're not looking for what tastes good. In fact, they're looking for certain criteria that they have to fulfill under Michelin's system. Most restaurants that are Michelin 1-star or above are price fixed menus, set menus, or omakase style. That's why they prefer a lot of Japanese restaurants, because the nature of Michelin, one of the criteria is the consistency of quality. And so they will go to visit restaurants maybe 3 or 4 times, but they want to try the same thing over and over again to try the consistency. Consumers go to restaurants, we like variety. That Michelin doesn't like variety, because then they have to try too many things on the menu to figure out if there's quality for the whole menu. So there is some bias in there. The other thing is that Michelin always says our inspectors are anonymous and no one knows. That's not quite true. I think most restaurants that are in the kind of Michelin hunt do kind of recognize kind of there's certain criteria for Michelin inspectors. And to say that they're totally anonymous is probably not true. They are like any other thing. I'm sure most restaurants have books on the Michelin inspectors. If you think about it, Michelin has rated Vancouver for 4 years. So is it conceivable they're going to send different people every 4 years? Because in order for them to rate a Michelin recommended or Michelin star restaurant, they have to go to that restaurant 3 to 4 times in the cycle. And so is it possible that they have that many inspectors in the world that are going to fly them out? They're generally going to be the same people, and generally the restaurants are going to have books on these people. There are certain criteria that they have with Michelin people. They're probably going to set menus. They're not going to bring their own wine. They're probably going to have one glass of wine. They're not going to have a cocktail. There's little things that are subtle that can kind of identify them. They're not going to be taking photos of the food. They're not going to have kids in their party. It's fairly obvious. It's not going to be a party of 6. It's usually either a party of 2 or party of 4. So to say they're anonymous is not quite, in my opinion, true. People kind of do know who are potentially inspectors and probably have books on a lot of the inspectors, because they have to have some type of kind of industry criteria or knowledge. It can't be just regular people. So it's not really random, and it's this idea that they are completely anonymous, I think is not true. If the restaurants think that they're inspectors, they definitely will probably target that table or flag that table to get a little bit better service and a little bit more attention. As I said before, there seems to be quite a favoritism or a bent towards Japanese restaurants. You'll see that all around the world in the Michelin world. And again, there is a reason for that. Generally, the Michelin standard works really well with French cuisine, works really well with price fix or set menus, and works really well with Japanese food, because a lot of restaurants do have omakase, which is a set course. They like the harmony of that. They like the balance. They like the story. One of my beasts with Vancouver Michelin again, very proud that we have 76 recommended restaurants and want to get as many as possible. But I do wish that they do put more diversified Chinese cuisine in there. One of the things with Vancouver people don't realize is Vancouver is a hotbed for multiple types of Chinese cuisine. Many areas in North America may not be familiar that there are so many different types of cuisine. So most of North America will be more familiar with Hong Kong or Cantonese cuisine. And that's very popular all through the 80s and 90s. But with the kind of globalization of food and travel and the world, China has emerged as a real power. And of course, as you may realize, China is a very huge country with many different regional cuisines. So with that influx, you've got more immigration from China, and you've got more talent in terms of food and more exposure and more people that want this type of food. So you'll get like not just Shanghai and Sichuan, now you get northern cuisine, you'll get Taiwanese now cuisine. So there's all these different types of regional cuisines that are so interesting, and you get them in Vancouver. I would dare say that in Vancouver you'll get this type of variety of Chinese cuisine more than any place in North America, probably more than any place outside of China and outside of Hong Kong. So it's a real hotbed for that, and I think unfortunately Michelin is missing the boat a little bit on that. I understand that some of these Chinese restaurants don't have great wine lists and don't have maybe the service standard they want, but I've explained it in other videos. One of the reasons is that at least in Vancouver, most Chinese restaurants allow people to bring their own wine, and most people do bring their own wine. So that's why most Chinese restaurants do not have extensive wine lists, because most people here bring their own wine and their wines are extensive. Likewise, they do not generally offer price fixed menus. They do have set menus for groups of 6 or 8 or 10. If you look back at my other video, Michelin Guide used to be a kind of a lost leader that helped Michelin sell tires. Starting about 2000, it started to actually break even and make money. And so Michelin now charges tourism associations for the right to have a Michelin guide. That's why, for instance, Vancouver and Toronto have it, and Montreal just got Michelin because they were not prepared to pay the fee. Now, obviously, you still have to have some quality of restaurant to merit having Michelin rate your restaurants. You can't have no good restaurants and just pay them a ton of money. But like on the flip side, you could have a ton of great restaurants, but if you are not prepared to contract with Michelin, you won't get a guide. And so, for instance, Las Vegas does not have a guide at this point. And so I'm not sure whether it's the quality of the restaurant or whether they won't pay, but I would think it's got to be the latter, because of course Vegas has got tremendous amount of restaurants and famous chefs there. Destination Vancouver, who's the person that contracts with Michelin, has a 5-year contract with Michelin. So we're in now year 4. There's one more year, and then it will be maybe renewed and also hopefully be added. That's why you don't see any restaurants rated from Burnaby, Coquitlam, Richmond. I'm really hoping that when that 5-year contract ends, that Richmond will participate. Now, I don't know the inner workings of the politics, whether they have to, Destination Vancouver has to agree or how that works. But I really hope that they do rate Richmond, because Richmond's got exceptional variety of Chinese and Asian cuisine. They've got arguably one of the top restaurants in Canada in Lao, and so that could potentially make it 1-star rating. It for sure, if it was in Vancouver, would be recommended. And so there's a lot of places that could be very exciting and could really bring the flavor of Vancouver, because that is the flavor of Vancouver. Vancouver is known for its Asian cuisine, great Japanese food, but also spectacular Chinese cuisine, but not what you just think like Hong Kong style. Everything. That means Taiwanese, and also we've got great Korean, Thai, Vietnamese. It's really a hotbed for that. And so there, I think by not going out to some of the what we call suburbs, like especially Richmond, where I'm familiar with, we're missing out quite a bit. Let's kind of discuss the Michelin rating. And again, I'm so happy for all these restaurants. I'm not going to disrespect any of these restaurants, but what I'm going to try to highlight is some things that hopefully Michelin will kind of look at a little bit more to kind of even it out and give a better flavor to the city. And going through this experience in Vancouver has really helped me to understand the Michelin system and what it's used for. I always thought that when you go to a place, let's say Paris, that you go, oh, I look at the Michelin guide, that must be, the best places, and that's where, the local places where locals eat. That's not the case. That's sometimes the case, but not always. And so, again, it doesn't really focus on what is unique about that place. It focuses on some other criteria that they're given by Destination Vancouver. So Destination Vancouver has obviously given them some marching orders to be kind of more eclectic. So if you look at the number of restaurants that are in Main Street, Fraser Street, and in the Chinatown district, I think it's disproportionate to the amount that you see in the west side of Vancouver and also in downtown Vancouver. So definitely, I think there has been a spin in that because there's some spectacular restaurants in the downtown core, and also the emphasis, if you look at what they've done, is on kind of a little bit more casual type restaurants. So most of the iconic upscale restaurants in Vancouver have not even, in fact, made the Michelin list. And to Vancouverites, the first year was quite surprising. And subsequently, some of these restaurants have retired or have closed, perhaps because these are older chefs. Perhaps their disappointment of not being even recognized by Michelin. There could be a number of reasons. So let's go through the one-star restaurants. We now have 12 one-star Michelin restaurants in Vancouver. And it's to note that 5 of these are Japanese restaurants. Only 1 is Chinese. And of the 1 that is Chinese, it's a fairly new restaurant. So it was just opened, I think, a year before Michelin started to rate restaurants. It's not an institution in Vancouver. And in fact, I think the Beijing Duck House they have other places, but I don't think they have a star anywhere else in the world, including Beijing. I'm not saying any of these restaurants should not get them, but I would note that there's not that many Chinese restaurants, and Vancouver, in my opinion, is one of the top cities in North America, probably in the world, for Chinese cuisine. So the 2 new restaurants this year, every restaurant that has had a star in Vancouver has kept their stars. The 2 restaurants that are added this year are Sumi Biyaki Arashi, which is on East Broadway, which is a yakitori restaurant, which is very interesting. And then Sushi Hun. I'm going to go and try these restaurants, but these are very difficult to book, in fact. I don't think, again, these are not institutional restaurants. These are fairly new restaurants. And I think Michelin does prefer like new restaurants because they want to find something that's new and surprising. One of the most iconic Japanese restaurants in Vancouver is Tojo on West Broadway. It's not even recommended. And so, again, I think there has been some emphasis on kind of the new and the more towards east side of Vancouver than the upscale and the west side of Vancouver. I've been to 9 of the 12 Michelin star restaurants, but some of them I haven't been to for a couple of years, so I will make a point in the end of this year and 2026 to try to go to each of those again to just get an updated view of them. And we'll note that there's another one that was given a star last year called Sushi Masuda. And that, again, is in Yaletown. I've never been there. And again, to this idea that it's anonymous, myself personally, and I am a local here in Vancouver, I don't think about this every day, but I have not been able to secure a reservation to Sushi Masuda. So Michelin has to go there at least 3 to 4 times. So it's for someone to be able to get a reservation 3 or 4 times at some of these restaurants would be somewhat difficult. And so that would give you some clue if you looked at the bookings at who it was. So, generally speaking, these are restaurants that most people would go, maybe once a year. I'm regular at some of these restaurants, and I don't go to them 4 times a year. So I'm sure they try to change out people, but again, how many inspectors could Michelin send here? And so this idea, going back to them being anonymous, I think is overstated. There are some clues when they are inspectors. There are now 49 recommended restaurants in Michelin Guide for Vancouver, and just being recommended is a tremendous honor already. So the 2 new ones are Ilem, which I've been to twice, I think in the last month. I think that is I'm really happy for them. I do think that's the correct rating for them. I think they are a very, very good restaurant, but in terms of quality, slightly below what I would consider Michelin 1 star, both in terms of service and food, but they're very, very close. And then the other one is near Rotondo, which I have not been, but I'd love to go. There are some restaurants that I have always thought that should be on this list that are not. And these are iconic restaurants of the city, like Tojo's, like High's, which is kind of an institution for steakhouses here. Things like Il Giardino is not on this list. There's quite a few. And in general, the restaurants that they have kind of chosen to leave off this list are either kind of older restaurants, institutional restaurants, really iconic restaurants in Vancouver, and generally on the west side of Vancouver or in downtown. So that's kind of where they've kind of left out. They do prefer newer, I can say cooler, younger, hipper restaurants. That's kind of Michelin, because maybe they're more eclectic. But I can tell you that that does not have a direct correlation to what people in Vancouver eat. So that's one takeaway that I've got now that I know how Michelin works in Vancouver and how that equates to other cities and how I use Michelin, which I'll talk about at the end of this video. There are now 15 Bib Gourmand restaurants. Bib Gourmand restaurants recommend high quality cooking with a kind of affordable price tag. And again, the one that they've got on, the new one this year, is called Good Thief, and that is in 2025. So that's good for them. I've never been into that restaurant. I have been to Ann and Chi many times. So, but again, this is kind of random how they do this, because as people who are in Vancouver, they've got places like Sushi Hill and Vidges and Seaport City on the Bib Gourmand, which is kind of inexpensive. So I don't know what they're eating at those restaurants, but Seaport City, at least I've been there many times, is considered one of the most expensive Chinese restaurants out there. So I'm not sure what they're eating there. Same thing with Sushi Hill. Maybe it's the way we eat here, but Sushi Hill would not be considered, I think, and I'm happy to hear other people's comments, would not be considered an inexpensive place to eat sushi. I mean, it's really high quality sushi. So same thing with Vidges. I don't think that's, I guess you could do it, but it's not, in my mind, what I would consider a really affordable places. There are some others that are much more affordable. So like for instance, Lunch Lady on the list, that would be an affordable place. Phnom Fen would be also an affordable place, like the udon place Motonubu. Udon, again, those would, to me, would fit under the category. So sometimes I find that Michelin is, how they kind of do things is not clear, But again, that's part of the anonymous part of it. They can't really tell you. Although my understanding is that restaurants can always ask them, hey, I didn't get a Michelin star. What was the problem? And I don't know what the standard is. But again, without knowing who the judges are and knowing how they judge things, it's very hard to comment on these things. Michelin also has a Michelin Green Award, which is awarded to restaurants with excellence in sustainable gastronomy. And this is kind of a weird one too, because most people, I think, would believe that Vancouver is one of the most green or emphasize sustainability cities in the world, let alone North America. And for us not to have a green award for any of our restaurants is a little bit head scratching in my opinion. Again, I don't know the standard and whatever, but it's almost every restaurant that we know is farm to table. A lot of them have their own gardens. They do their own stuff. They compost everything. The whole city is very into sustainability and reducing CO2 emissions, all that type of stuff. So to not recognize that for a city that is recognized for this, to me is quite, again, head scratching. Well, all in all, Michelin has been great for Vancouver. I think if you've talked to Destination for Vancouver, it's been great for the city. I think it's been exciting for locals like myself to have a Michelin star restaurants in town. We're very proud of it. It probably has increased prices. Fortunately, it hasn't affected very many restaurants. So, in other cities, I've heard that, because of Michelin, some restaurants have changed to a price fixed menu, which is really not everyday food. It's kind of a special occasion thing and really is meant, I think, more for tourism, quite frankly, and not for locals. But I'm glad that trend hasn't happened in Vancouver, because most of the business is driven in Vancouver is with locals. And of course, tourism is important, but with most of the great restaurants in town, they already have enough business with the locals. They, of course, they like international visitors to visit our restaurants, but they don't really need them. And so it's kind of, you'll see most of the top end restaurants already have a wait list. And I'm really glad that Michelin has come to Vancouver. I think it's done a lot of great things for our tourism. It's made us a world city for food. That's great. But what I have learned through this system, or through them rating Vancouver restaurants, is I look at Michelin much differently. So again, when I used to go to cities around the world, first thing I would do is look at Michelin or the top 50 restaurant list. And in my mind, Michelin would represent, hey, what's hot? What's the hottest restaurants in Paris that local people go to? Not what is the restaurant that most tourists go to. And so I think Michelin, now I understand, is used in conjunction with the tourism associations and is there to draw tourists. That is not to say that all these restaurants are tourist driven, but I would say it's not a certain thing that if you have a Michelin recommended or Michelin star restaurant, that is going to be a popular or iconic restaurant in that city. And as an example, a lot of these restaurants, the last three, Sushi Masuda and the two that got stars this year, are fairly new restaurants in town and probably not that well known among the general population. Maybe among the foodie or the chef population, they're well known, but they would be fairly startups, like 1 or 2 years in the making. And so they would be, even for locals, most people in Vancouver probably would not have been to that restaurant more than maybe once or twice. And in fact, I have not been to any of those restaurants at all. And so I kind of like everyone else in the world, I will, because Michelin gives them a star, I will go check it out. And I think that's the use of Michelin. But having said that, now that I know that how it works, when I go to cities, I actually don't rely on Michelin as much. I do look for Michelin recommended restaurants that are kind of focused on the local cuisine. So for example, when I go to Bangkok later this year, I'm gonna look at some Michelin restaurants that serve Thai food. When I go to Spain, when I went to Barcelona, I wanted to go to Michelin star restaurants that serve Spanish food. And for Vancouver, I guess it would be Japanese food and Asian food, which is very strong in our market. It is really interesting because in terms of population, the population in Vancouver, I don't have the exact statistics, but there's many more people of Chinese descent than Japanese descent here. That would be probably skewed, if just guessing off the top of my head, probably in a 5 or 6 to 1 ratio easily. But in terms of restaurants, I didn't know this. The statistics show that there's actually more Japanese restaurants than Chinese restaurants in Vancouver. And so that's kind of interesting. But again, that's really the hotbed. And some of the hotbeds are in the localized suburban communities, Burnaby, Coquitlam, Surrey, Richmond. So again, Michelin is missing a lot of those really great restaurants that are very Vancouver-like. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I use Michelin differently than I used to. I used to think Michelin was very representative of the city. It's representative of what critics and chefs think is good food, but it's not representative of what, hey, these are what local people eat all the time. It could be, but it's not completely parallel, or it does not translate 100% in terms of their restaurants. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. I'm sure it's controversial. I'm sure people have other opinions, but I'm happy to talk about them. Until next time, happy eating.